No, it's not a gimmick or clickbait. I really am going to teach you how to measure to a tenth of a thousandth of an inch in less than 10 minutes. I've taught a lot of people this, and it's not that hard. It's an essential skill if you're getting into machining. Maybe you're rebuilding an engine and you need to measure bearing clearances, or perhaps you just want to impress the wife by telling her exactly how thin that ice is that you keep skating on. Now, I know what you're thinking. The thumbnail said 4 tools, but you only see 3. And that's because I don't want you to fast forward when you see the 4th. Yes, we're going to start with a ruler or a 6-inch scale. There's a couple of key takeaways and a mindset that I want to get you in that are most easily demonstrated on the 6-inch scale. So please watch this in its entirety. I've taught a lot of people how to do this, and we're going to follow a natural progression that makes learning this skill much easier. So just what can we take away from the 6-inch scale? Well, first, if we were measuring along the top edge of this scale, we would look at the resolution of our tool or our scale. Here we can see it's 1/8 of an inch. So if I were at 3 whole inches and I move over one line, I'm moving over 1/8 of an inch. If I were on the bottom scale and I move over one line, I would be moving over 1/16 of an inch. Recognizing the resolution of your scale is important because all measuring tools have a scale, but they're not necessarily the same. The second thing is that this is a graduated scale, and all of our measuring tools also have a graduated scale. And what do I mean by graduated? Well, if we look at the whole inch lines, they are the longest on this scale. The next shortest are the half-inch lines, followed by the quarter-inch lines and then the 1/8 inch lines. If you can't see that clearly by just looking at it, this visual aid will probably help. Here we've covered up the 1/8 inch lines, and all we have are the quarters just sticking through, the half sticking through noticeably more, and then the whole inch, and so on and so forth. Here I've covered up the quarter-inch lines, here the half-inch lines, and then here all of the lines. This tool here is a 6-inch dial caliper. It can accurately measure to 1/1000th of an inch. We can see the resolution printed on the dial face here. The way this tool works is that we open it up, place in the object that we wish to measure, and then close the jaws on the part until we're just making contact. I'm going to remove this tubing so that we can take a look just at the tool and show you how to take your reading. First, we're going to start with the graduated scale on the frame of the tool. You may notice that this one has a significantly longer line than that one. This too has a significantly longer line than that too. This is the graduated scale. These taller lines are whole inches, and if we count the spaces in between, it takes 10 lines to get from one whole inch to the next. So each of these shorter lines are 100 thousandths of an inch. So we look at this edge right here on the movable jaw, and we can see that we're 2 inches, 200 thousandths, and not quite to 300 thousandths. So where in between 2.2 and 2.3 are we? That is when we then look at the dial face. This pointer is pointed at, looks like 53. So our measurement here is 2.253 inches. Here we have a vernier caliper. This particular one measures all the way out to 14 inches. Its operation is very similar to that of the dial caliper. We have a fixed jaw on the frame as well as a moving jaw. So I'm going to open this up, place in the item that I wish to measure, and then close the jaws on that item until they just make contact. This particular tool has a pretty nifty feature where I can lock this second movable jaw, and then I have a fine adjustment. So I'll open that up, get my item square between my jaws, and then close down until I have a little bit of resistance. I'm just touching the part. All right, let's take our measurement. To start, this tool has 2 different scales, one for internal measurements and one for external measurements. So let's make it a little less terrifying, because in this case, we're taking an external measurement and just cover all that up. Suddenly, it's not so bad. All right, just like the dial caliper, we have a 0 line, and that's where we're going to start our measurement. we've got 2 whole inches and 3 whole inches here, noted by the tallest lines on our graduated scale. So we know we're between 2 and 3. Then we have 20 divisions between 2 and 3 inches. Again, our medium length lines are on the numbers. Those are 100 thousandths of an inch. And these shorter lines are then 50 thousandths of an inch because there's one in between each 100 thousandths of an inch. So if we look at our zero, we can see that we're somewhere between 2.45 and 2.5. Where in between there? This is a Vernier scale. And you can see that there are a whole bunch of lines on this movable jaw and a bunch of lines on the fixed frame. And if we follow along, we can see that they are becoming closer and closer into alignment with one another. The way we read a Vernier scale is by finding the lines that line up the best and then taking that reading on the scale. So in this case, we've got 40 thousandths, looks like 45 thousandths right here. So we're going to go back. We've got 2.45 plus an additional 45 thousandths, or 2.495 inches. Okay, we're ready to measure down now to 1/10,000th of an inch using this 0 to 1 inch outside micrometer. Micrometers work much like a C-clamp. We have a thimble out on the end, which is attached to the spindle. The spindle is our moving contact point for measuring the part, and the anvil over here is a stationary contact point for measuring our part. I'm going to take this precision 1-inch ground block, open my micrometer up, and I'm going to close it down until it makes contact. And this micrometer has a friction thimble so that it will continue to spin without exerting too much force on the frame. Now, some of you probably noticed that my micrometer has a little cheat window here. Mitutoyo calls this their digimatic system. It's great for taking quick measurements when you're working by the part. It's not so good for learning. So we're going to go ahead and cover that up. I'm going to explain these scales real quick before I tell you how to read them. This, think of as our 6-inch scale. It's where we start our measurement with the least amount of resolution. To further break that down, think of this graduated scale on the thimble, which you can see increases as we rotate it around, 25 thousandths of an inch. Think of that as the dial face on our dial caliper. This line running along the sleeve is our pointer, and this is the dial face. And then when we go to measure into the 10 thousandths of an inch on our micrometer, we have a Vernier scale. And so learning how to read a Vernier scale was important. So we're zoomed in on our micrometer, and we're going to start with the sleeve. Just like with the dial caliper and Vernier caliper, these numbers here with the longest lines on this scale correspond to 100 thousandths of an inch. In between, we have medium length lines, those are 50, and in between those, we have our shortest lines, and those are 25 thousandths of an inch. Our reading is taken at the edge of the thimble, and think of this as the 0 line on the dial caliper or the Vernier caliper. So I can see that I'm somewhere in between 700 and 800 thousandths. I can then see that I have 50 thousandths here, I have another 25 thousandths here, and so I am somewhere in between 775 thousandths of an inch and 800 thousandths of an inch. Where in between 775 and 800 am I? That is when I then look at the scale that is on the thimble. I've got two numbers here, 15 and 16, which are fairly close to being lined up with that line that runs along the sleeve. I'm going to pick the smaller of the two, this 15. So we have 775, and then 15 would be 790 thousandths. So now I can see that I'm somewhere in between 790 thousandths and 791 thousandths. But where in between am I? That is when I then tip my micrometer up on its side and I look at the Vernier scale. And I am looking to see where the two lines on the vernier scale and on the thimble line up best. And I would say that these two lines here line up the best. So I'm going to follow this line all the way along the sleeve, and I can see a 5 right here. This is 5/10,000ths of an inch. And so our total measurement, we add all of these components together, we have 790 and 5/10ths, 0.7905. And if we wanted to check to see if we were right, you can see that my Digimatic system is showing somewhere in between 790 and 791. So I would say we're spot on. And there you have it. You can measure to 1/10 of a thousandth of an inch. Now I'm going to give you a couple of tips on how to use the tools effectively, because reading them and handling them are two different skills. But before I do, if you enjoyed this content, what I'd really like you to do, or didn't enjoy it, is leave a comment down below. This is a fairly new venture for me, and your feedback would be really helpful in making sure that I'm taking the right direction with the content I'm creating. So my first tip for using your measuring tools is make sure you keep them clean. You can see I set a few down here and I set them on a clean rag. This slimy, oily gunk in the bottom of my machine will wreak havoc on the delicate precision parts of your measuring tools. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen measuring tools left on a machine while the machine's in operation. If I had $1 for every pair of these that a student destroyed in a week, probably wouldn't be making YouTube videos. This pair I have had since high school. I won them as an award in 2007, and they're as good as the day I got them, and that's because when I'm done using them, I put them back in the drawer. I don't leave them on the machine. Second is the way you hold the tools. Now, dial caliper, I like to lay the frame across my fingers and then use my thumb to slide. A micrometer can be a little awkward, and a lot of people like to hold these with two hands, but if you're measuring something, you need to hold what you're measuring in the other hand. And so getting your ring finger or pinky finger in the frame and then using your pointer finger and thumb to manipulate the thimble is going to make it a lot easier. Now, before you take any measurement, you should always make sure that your tool zeros. And what do I mean by that? Well, this tool goes down to 0 inches. And if I had a piece of dirt or a small burr or something on the contact points where I'm taking my measurement, the tool is not going to give me an accurate measurement. So all I have to do is take a piece of paper, close down onto that paper, and slide the tool off the side, and that's going to wipe these clean of any dirt, and now they're zeroed. Best part is if you flip it over, works perfectly good for a dial caliper too. All right, now what do you do if you have to zero a tool that doesn't close to 0? This is a 1 to 2 inch micrometer, and the proper tool to do that with is called a standard. So this is a set of precision ground rods to very exact lengths, 2, 3, 4, and 5 inches in this set. All right, and I would take my 1 to 2 inch micrometer and measure down over this 2 inch bar and make sure that I am right on 0. If I don't have these, a relatively affordable substitute is a 1, 2, 3 block. I think I bought a set of 2 of these on Amazon for, I don't know, 20 bucks maybe. They're not much. And they're precision ground to exactly 1, 2, and 3 inches, usually within 1/10. And so for most anything you're doing, that is going to be perfectly fine. I hope you like this. Stick around if you want to see some more fun projects. We've got 1, 2, 3 motorcycles, a tractor, an old station wagon, an old pickup truck, and a lifted Crown Vic, all needing some love.